It has been a couple of weeks since we could say this, but the gang's all here. And guys, it is time to let it rip. Guys, thank you for joining us this morning. This is the show where we pick a topic, sometimes controversial, sometimes hot takes, and give our honest opinions about it. Since the gang's all here, I want to take a moment to go ahead and introduce everybody. To my right, um, you've got Pastor TC, the gaming pastor,
So,
pastor of Sure Foundation. Um, to the bottom right, you've got Andrew, the misfit himself, over from the ministry Misfits, as well as co host of Kingdom on the Road. And
And
then,
is it pagan? And
and
all
is it
sorts of
pagan?
other
And
things that we keep finding to do together.
all of the other network shows. Absolutely. Uh, and then down here is Ant, Apostle Ant, Pastor Ant, pastor of Sure Foundation and host of the Love Thy Neighbor podcast. Um, guys, what I want you guys to do, we're kicking it off this morning. We got a lot to talk about. T's going to tee us up with our topic for this week. But what I want you to do is, I want you guys to do me a favor. Where you're watching from, I want you guys to hit the share button. Let people know that we're here this morning. We're chopping it up. We're getting into the thick weeds, and let people know that we're here this morning. You can also feel free to navigate to that comment section wherever you are tuning in from, and let us know. Like Kenji here. Good morning, sir.
good morning.
Glad you are with us. But yeah, we want to hear from you. These shows are always blessed and benefited by you guys and hearing from you guys in the comments section. So chime in, let us know where you're tuning in from. So T, a couple of weeks ago, you had a an idea for an episode. So go ahead and tee us up, so to speak.
No pun intended. Yeah, coming from that thought, me and Joe were talking, and I've been pastoring now for a total of 3 years, but I've been an elder in my church probably about 6 to 7, I want to say, around there. Because all that encompassed me being a pastor. 'Cause I'm still an elder to this day at my church, but I'm also a pastor. So put all this experience together, we'll say go ahead around up to 7 years. But I'm definitely the youngest pastor in my church right now. I have two powerful gentlemen. One is here on stream, who is a senior pastor, and I have another friend of mine that serves a lot in our community, in our church, Pastor Joseph Hill. But out of the two, I'm the youngest pastor. So a lot of times I'm still, for lack of better words, fumbling my way to figure out this thing called pastoring, if I would. But some of things I've been told growing up and even seen by older pastors outside my church is that there's this kind of weird, I call it weird because possibly I just don't understand it. And that's the hopes of this stream today, is for us to come together and say, okay, yeah, we agree with that, or no, we don't agree with that. But there's been this common trend of this word common that I keep hearing, that pastors must be set apart. Now, as a people of God, of course, we know we are to be set apart. But as a leader or a pastor or whatever we say, fivefold ministry or whatever it is you are, there's supposed to be a sense of like real nuance that you're different from everyone else, which could leave you creating barriers, it seems like, from people to approach you. And to me, it seems like it could limit a lot of friendships. So even to the conduct of how you interact with people, it's always like you're on your P's and Q's. And it seems like any form of too much transparency could be very dangerous for you. or common for you. Can be in certain circles joking or having a good time. Otherwise, you're too common. There's a certain bar. That's the way I've heard it over the years. Now, on the personal take, I'm a very transparent person myself. Don't let my sleepiness this morning fool you by any ways. I like to joke. I like to clown. All that and above. I have a little god brother here. Awesome young man of God, but me and him are full of shenanigans. And so it's been brought to me a lot that sometimes my shenanigans looks like not befitting of a pastor. As a matter of fact, this week, I had critique, very, I would say sharp, wasn't even a rebuke. It was just someone just attacking me about things concerning my age. I can go on about this, but the last one I point out, me being a gaming pastor on my YouTube channel, some have found issue with that. That's too common. Pastors should be gaming and doing this. I mean, I've heard it all. Whatever you want to say, that comes with the title pastor, which I do not reject, but I also love because God called me it. So I want to get into semantics about titles because, we'll be here on another stream for that. But I will say it's something I'm embraced because the Bible declares that God gave some to be. And so if God gave me to be, I'm going to embrace what God gave me to be because it's who I am. And so I've had all. So I want to pick the audience's mind. We got credible leadership here on the screen right now. Pastors in their own right. Joe, Apostle Anthony, even though I call him Apostle, I a lot of times refer him for me personally as pastor. And Andrew, I know I'm pretty sure you got a lot to say. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the table being set. Hopefully that was pretty clear. Let's go ahead and get this thing started.
Yeah, well said.
Well, who's going to start it off?
All right, Andrew, this is your first time on this particular show. And I know that you have a interesting, dare I say, complicated history with the pulpit and with the role and all of those kinds of things. And the second that this came across the wire that this was going to be a topic of conversation, you're like, absolutely. So go ahead and chime in. Let's hear from you.
Yeah, so the complicated side of it is that like you were talking about, the idea of what actually the role of a pastor is within the context that I'm coming out of within white evangelicalism is so stripped of any biblical relevancy of what actually it means to be given the role of pastor, or
especially on the East Coast.
Yeah. is something where the whole idea of the idea of what a pastor is either they think that the pastor, if they're in the church, they think the pastor sits in his office until Sunday, comes out, does his thing, sits back in there, and his only job is to wait by the phone for you to call and tell him something's wrong, so that way he can rush to it. And then they also somehow magically think that their family is okay. If they're not in the congregation, then the expectation is, oh, well, if you carry the role of pastor, then that means I have to avoid you calling fire down on me while I'm around you. And so we're caught in this mix of one just sees me as a tool. The other one sees me as an agent of God's wrath. And I'm here saying, like, I'm neither of those things.
That's good, man. You're already cooking.
So, I mean, that's why it's become complicated, is because like you already know, I don't sit around letting people think that I tell them why they're wrong.
Right. For real.
Yeah. And what do you got?
Yeah, I think the wording, I'm a big person that focuses on what do we mean? What are we saying? And so when we say, should pastors be common or holy, set apart, that type of deal, it trips me up a little bit because, you know, there's a difference between being close and being common.
Very good.
You know, I think when we're talking about common, it's like, what do we really mean when we say common? You know, because I think about Jesus, right, and his disciples. Jesus was close to his disciples, but I don't think you would call him common.
Mm. Mm.
But he was close with them. He ate with them. They basically lived together, right? But there was always a line of respect for who Jesus was. You know, they didn't run up and, you know, punch Jesus in the arm. Hey, Jesus, what's up? What's up, man? No, they actually saw him as a leader, but at the same time, they had a question they asked. If they, you know, had an issue, they talked to him. You know, as a matter of fact, Jesus said that I no longer call you my servants, I call you my friends.
Mm.
And so I think it's trying to figure out what the line is that trips most people up.
I'm
Because-
glad. Ooh.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, there's a closeness,
Mm.
you know, in leading people in caring for souls. I think Andrew brought up something that I like, because a lot of times talking to the pastor is like going to the principal's office,
Mm.
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Like, well, why does the pastor want to talk to me? Why did, well, you know? And then there's the flip side of it. Are there certain things that you should stay away from if you're a pastor, that when it's time to speak into someone's life or say something that is important, or correction or direction, are you still in that place? And I'll give you one last example before I kick it over. I worked in a high school for many years. And one of the things in the high school is that the students, they need to know how much you care before they care how much you know.
Mhm.
Right? They want to know that you actually care about them. You're not just another adult, right? You know, because it's adults versus the the kids, right?
Mhm.
I remember being able to walk that line, whereas I could be close to them, I could talk with them, I could be, you know, I could have a joke here or there with them, but they remembered who I was and what my position was in their life. And so there was always an area of respect that wasn't crossed. And if it was, something was said and things were put back in order, and like, oh yeah, I went too far. And I feel like with pastors, as Andrew said, and I agree wholeheartedly, they're either put over in this corner of untouchable, right? You know, only time you see them is when they grace us with their presence on Sunday or Tuesday, you know, or when something is going wrong in my family, you have to get up and come see about it. Otherwise, stay away from me, stay out of my business, don't be around me,
Mhm.
you know, kind of deal. And it becomes really difficult to understand where that line is. So that's where I'll leave it there. Yeah.
So I want to catch up on the comments because it's already going before I throw my 2 cents in. So we've got Brenda K. Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you are with us. Kenji says he's tuning in from Orlando.
What's the weather report?
Brenda-
What's the weather report?
Right. What are we looking like?
Better,
I don't want
better
to
than
know. I don't want to know.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
No,
you
I
said
do
it's been
not.
cold lately.
I had the heater on for about an hour before I got in here, and it's already worn off. So
This is Colorado. You
Mhm.
know.
Oh,
start off with 30 degrees in the morning, 70 degrees by 4 o'clock in the afternoon out there.
It says 22 and sunny. How can you be 22 and
22 and sun. Colorado, man.
That's Celsius, right?
It says-
Right.
We got JB commenting, good morning, sir. Says spot on, says so true. And then Brenda chimes in, I will have to, take this down to be able to read it. And somebody actually asked me about that. The only reason why I have to do that with some of the comments is Restream, if it's past a certain length, cuts it off. So I need to be able to take it down to be able to read it. Definitely depends on each individual. Grew up in a very strict holiness church of God where fire and hell was preached, and yet the pastor was kind as a child. I felt comfortable approaching him. Then been in churches where the pastor appears to care, but is more into his own appearance than the actual needs of the congregation.
Oof. Oof.
Then Kenji writes, they need to know how much you care before they care how much you know. That is good.
Yeah.
And then the weather report, rainy and high of 75.
Look at that good weather.
And Kenji just lost his ability to comment on the stream. Awesome. No, I'm playing. I'm joking. All right. So thank you all for commenting. Seriously, keep them rolling. So, all right. I come into this from a different trajectory and perspective than a lot of you guys. I'm definitely closer to the timetable of tea than the rest of you guys, but I came in by way of I came into the role and then got ordained. And so doing this in the house church setting lent towards more intimacy in relationship, just naturally speaking. But there were still people who would come through the door and felt compelled to call me pastor.
Hmm.
And like that was it. And like, but it wasn't like I don't know, you can use it as a nickname almost in certain ways, but then there's other times where it's like there's this, I feel like there's this duty to call you pastor as a sign of respect and all of that. And I'm just like, I don't know. Some people call me Joe. The people in Sure Foundation, the name is Joe Day. You know what I mean? Like it's I don't, to me, being called and qualified is not the same as this constant need to be called pastor, right? That's its own conversation as far as that goes, but it does lend to a posture and a mentality that is easy to talk about from the perspective of the person in the pulpit. It's easy to talk about that perspective, but the reality is that institutionalized is this idea from the congregation that they have to interact with the pastor in a certain way in order for it to be respectful, in order for it to be proper, and all of that kind of stuff. So outside of how do we as colleagues address each other, it's also this idea of how do people, if you're clowning with somebody, if it's all jocularity, how does somebody from the outside conceive of that? And I'm going to draw an example here from my time in Colorado where I could see different versions of this when the guard was down, when the lights weren't on, when it was easier to do this sort of thing. T, you're you when we were at the celebration dinner and all that kind of stuff, that whole table had me laughing the entire time. That was a riot, sitting and hanging out with you guys and all of that. Next day, Ant, you're outside with the guys cutting it up about football and all that kind of stuff. So I say, and I juxtapose those things because we've talked about this before. Everybody who knows, and I can bust Ant's chops about this because I'm from there too. Something's broken in the brain of anybody who's born in Philly. There's just something inherently broken, and so there's this stoicism that's naturally instilled and all of that. And so I really do think in some ways you guys getting rowdy about football and all of that is your version of T clowning and all that kind of stuff. And I juxtapose those to raise, let me push in a little bit on what you said about comparing those things to how Jesus operated with his disciples and with the people that he walked with. Because my sniff test, my radar is that smells like that's going to end up being a generational difference between the way that we conceive of those things. Not anything. It doesn't, just because, and if every episode is somebody's first episode, all of those kinds of things. So I haven't said it yet this time, but the thesis statement of this show is that we are not going to agree on every single thing, and it's all cool in the gang. It's all good. We don't need to agree on it on every single thing. Just because we disagree doesn't make it heresy. It's all good. So unpack what you're looking at when you say, like, there's this line and that, like, there's an extent to that aspect of the relationship.
For me, when I say that, there's a point where if people don't see the position or the spiritual position that you have in their life, then when you do have to maybe say something difficult, it's harder to receive it from somebody who you say, well, that's just Ant. He can't tell me nothing. He doesn't have the right to say that to me. Well, then why would God, call me to this position in your life if I don't have, if I'm not supposed to be able to correct or direct, to say, hey, that's not the right way to approach that, or hey, that's a bit too much, and let's look at scripture, let's talk through that, let's see what that looks like. And that's why I say there's such a fine line that we walk, that can I joke, can I have a conversation? Me and Kenji, when I was out in Florida, we went and had breakfast together. We had breakfast together, we talked, we hung out, we laughed, we even went back to the Airbnb and played board games, right? It's like, but not once was there, like, I don't know, any form of me disrespecting him or him disrespecting me or us crossing a line. And I think the line is a feel thing, right? It's not like there's like this line, like, here's the line. If I was to say that, I feel like that line is different for different people, because there's a feel thing, like, where where should I halt this so that it doesn't take away from what this person is supposed to be in my life, you know? And some people, that line is, they don't know what to do with that line. So they run the opposite direction. As Andrew said, you're hellfire. You're the, what's the one that I saw a video this week? Touch not my anointed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that verse is kind of where we're struggling with this line. Like, okay, is the pastor just totally off limits? He can say and do whatever he wants and be, and nobody's supposed to be able to say or do anything when it comes to, don't touch him because he's God's anointed. But then you have this Jesus guy who's at people's houses. He's
inviting himself into people's houses. Like, not even inviting himself.
Exactly. And so, but yet they don't, whatever that line is, and I'm telling you, it's really hard to articulate whatever that line is. They never cross it. But yet they can have meals with them. They can sit around the fire with them. They can, have this close relationship without it being something that, as you guys were talking about earlier, from the outside, a person says, well, what is that? So I think this is why we have to have this conversation, because how do you articulate what that line truly is? And is it a subjective line? Is it a moving goalpost? Oh my goodness. Right? What is that line?
Yeah, well, I've been there. To be on the other side of your comment, I think there's a time you can be respectable, or, for lack of better words, politically correct in your conduct with people, and people will still find fault to say you have no right to say that in my life. I've seen both.
Yeah.
I've seen people be totally relatable and able to approach, and people walk out with that. And I've seen people closed off, and people still walk off with, like, if you say something to me, you have no right to say it to me. I think I'm for just to kind of find my line, because this is actually right up my alley, and it's really in some ways uncomfortable to talk about, but in some ways, like, I'm ready to talk about this because it's who I am. Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where people around me feel a sense of connection, a friend. They feel they can joke and let their guard down. And that's a powerful thing. But I think with that comes the lack of respect sometimes. And for years, I'm like, I'm trying to figure that out, right? I'm trying to figure out if that's because sometimes it's me and maybe I'm just too open and people just feel like they could just say whatever they want to say when they're upset, frustrated, right? Because people will get mad. They will get mad when it comes down to you having to correct them, having to actually, quote unquote, pastor them. They're going to get pissed off, right? You can play games with them all week. For me, video games, you could joke around and watch satires and comedy and actually have some clean conduct while cussing, going crazy, but just having a good time. And when a person is challenged with something, I've determined that that's where respect is going to be determined. And I think that is very could be very subjective and perspective driven at times for me, because sometimes people are just pissed and it has nothing to do with me, but it's coming at me. Does that make sense? They could be mad that they have an inkling and the feeling that what I'm doing is wrong, and this is why I'm talking to you in the first place, but I'm not ready to change what's wrong, so I have to come at you, even though you're confronting me about something I'm already been confronted about. And so, someone say, well, isn't that disrespectful? Because the verbiage they're using at that time may not be the most pleasant, right? It may not be the most put together. Is that not disrespectful? They're getting, quote unquote, too common. I'm going to go ahead back up to Ant's question in a second. Or, there's just times where I think the positive side of it, that people do hear you because of that closeness, because you're so close. They're able to receive and down things more better because they have spent time with you. I've seen both, but I feel like right now, my current state, there's a little bit of, if I had to give one more aside, I feel like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you do, you have no right to say it to me because I just feel like you're younger. I feel like for me, I'm in this age thing. It's really weird because I'm not a complete younger man, but I'm not an older man either. I'm right in the middle age, right? And so I feel like that's where I'm at. People like, well, first off, you're not this guy's age. So what you say just might lose value just because of your age. And there's people who are younger. They're like, well, everything he says is incredible because he gets me because he's right at that age. So he understands what I'm going through. And then you got your outside perspective, people watching your interactions, and they're like, that's just wrong, period. You know, they should be hanging out with him like that, right? They shouldn't be around him having those conversations and joking around like that. You know, we're just at this potluck at our church, and we were clowning about chicken and how different forms of chicken have different meanings. And you can tell there's a sense of people looking at this like, why are you even talking about that? And there's some people that are like, that's cool that they're talking about that. So you got like a variety of different things going on. But just to back up, I know I feel this thing about to take off. But this is what I mean by common. Okay, so I believe I'm coming out the word common. I am thinking a teeny bit biblically, just a teeny bit biblically. Okay, and I know some Bible scholars on here, so you go ahead, correct me. All right. So what? So I'm thinking about in the sense of trashy. Okay, I'm thinking about in the sense where value is diminished. Okay, like it's cheap. Okay, that's what I mean by common. Personally, I use this word because I hear it a lot. That's why I said this way to Joe. But if I had to, no, I'm just gonna leave it the way it is. I ain't gonna rephrase it. We're just gonna run with this thing. So that's what I mean by common. Okay, trashy. So and then I like what Anthony interject with this statement is close. People actually getting close because to me they're both relevant. Where I like it or not, they both are relevant. People getting too close to pastors. I have heard people say pastors shouldn't have friends in the congregation. Their relationships should be outside the church. Matter of fact, they should even have that. Really, their family is just enough. You know, and you better watch out with that one because what they do with their family might be too much too. So that's why I have breathed and experienced with my life of living. Sorry to rant so long, but I would jump in there.
But I'm gonna pin that friends, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about that. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. Well, no, Andrew, I can see you wanting to chop in.
I was gonna say, everybody has said something without saying it so far, and that's I'm gonna just ask the question real quick before you continue. Have you found that more people are willing to respect the idea of you as pastor inside the walls of the church or outside of it?
Well, I guess I'm gonna start off. I think I'm gonna be considered the unicorn because both inside and outside, I have garnered somehow respect, and I think it's because I've had some positions that were pastoral even without being a pastor in these other environments. I've been a coach, right? So there's the same way people call me pastor, they call me coach. So like some of my kids, they'll walk up to me in the grocery store, "Hey, coach," and it feels the same way that it would be pastor. And so I think because of my experiences, I might be a little bit different, you know, in a sense, because I've always had those positions where people say, "Hey, pastor," "Hey, coach," you know, type of deal. And so I've always had kind of the same thing inside and outside the church. That's for me personally.
So I want to amend, and the reason why I popped this one up on the screen and is because there's a tone and tenor and posture that you conduct yourself with among people that they know that you care.
Mhm.
whether it be as a coach, whether it be as a pastor, whether it be as a father, whether it be as a
I
friend,
try.
whether it
I
be
try my
as
best.
whatever. And there's just, no, I'm not sitting here trying to blow smoke or lord you,
Right.
Mhm.
because you're just another guy like the rest of us.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
But the
For
amount
sure.
of time that you've spent caring for the Aurora, Denver area as a whole, as a community, as an entire spot, that has ripple effects. And I bring up Brenda's comment because that's just a posture that I watch people have, where they're comfortable asking you for prayer, they're comfortable approaching you, and all of that. So I just wanted to throw that in because of you commenting on that particularly. I'll jump in. I think it's a yes and sort of thing, because institutionally,
Mhm.
I would say that it's more of the inside the walls, because that's what stepping into what some would consider real pastoring,
Mm.
that's what people are more accustomed to. That's the vibe check. When we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Andrew, and this is what I'm about to say is absolutely nothing new for Ant and for T. I care deeply about the modus operandi of you love the community that you're in.
Mhm.
You care for the community that you're in. And when you've lived in the same space for long enough and you keep caring for the community that you're in, that has a way of opening doors, that has a way of eliciting conversations, that has a way of establishing relationships. And so my answer is a little convoluted because it reflects the way that I walk between worlds. It
Mhm.
reflects the way that I am very familiar with the community house church scene, as well as the Sunday morning model and that scene
Mhm.
as well. T, what about you?
Yeah, I think there's no way I can not have this conversation about having my experience in it. Just to be honest with you, I think that's what we're aiming for anyway.
Mhm.
So first off, before I was a pastor, I would say, to Andrew's question, it seemed like inside the church, pastor was pastor. Outside the church, I didn't know the guy. And for me, that was already a disconnect because I felt like there was no way of approaching this guy.
Mhm.
I was a 14-year-old boy because when I came into relationship with Christ, I was 14. I didn't grow up in church. So most of my introduction started when I was 14, where I really understood what it meant to serve in the church. And I did that on my own. So my mom worked a 9-to-5 job. She was a hardworking woman. So was my father, but my father really didn't deal with church like that because of his own willingness with the Catholic faith in itself. And so my relationship with Christ was always my responsibility at the age of 14. And so just feeling like the most important person that has been emphasized in my church, I feel like there's a fear of even going to him.
Mm.
And then that expanding into becoming older, going to a different church where I had to set up meetings to meet with my pastor, which I didn't find offensive, to be honest with you. Because I was like, this is the most important person in the church. So you need to schedule a time with him. And that was rare because, again, my fear of going to this person who's so untouchable. So I'm in some cases, very introverted. I'm not a very initiative-driven person when it comes to initiating conversations or things like that, when I feel very intimidated. And so there was that, or I would be called into the quote unquote pastor's office because I was doing something too edgy at the time at my age. You know, we come a long way from things in African American churches. So I'm not to isolate, but I'm gonna talk about my experience as African American churches. There were certain things like pop locking and dancing. You didn't do that back in the day. That was heresy. That was frowned upon. So when I'm introduced these concepts in a praise group that we have at the church, because a young lady brings me in who was a minister at the time, she's like, I always see you pop locking. I want to incorporate this into the praise and worship movement at our church. And I was crumping and all that stuff back in the day. Now I sound old because I don't know what, right? But anyway, these ideas and concepts will be introduced in. Needs to say certain church folks didn't care for the posture of that stuff being in their church, and it would go to the pastor, and the pastor would call me and having to defend myself with my own pastor and say, well, what does the Bible say? And having to take a stance of being biblical back then, even though back then I swear I didn't have a biblical bone in my body. It was just all Holy Spirit and gas. I'm just being honest with you. I didn't know how to read the Bible until I got the Sure Foundation. Okay, I read it as a very powerful book. I knew stuff was happening, but if you ask me the exegete, you ask me like Greek and Hebrew, I'm like, oh, what is that? Like, what does that even mean? So it was very weak, but I knew that God wasn't limited either. So I just felt like Holy Spirit was really leading me in the word back then. And I had him bring to my pastor, and it was incredible. And I say this to Pastor Holling here in Colorado. He was very humble. He was just like, he's right. When Baptist deacons was like, yeah, you got to quit coming at this young man. Because the scripture I used, I said, well, David, this says when he got the Ark of the Covenant back, he danced indignantly. What does that even look like? Bro danced out of his clothes. I ain't saying we should strip, Pastor, but I'm just saying there's a sense of that this type of worship made people uncomfortable back in the day. Was praise and worship to God. Because I understood that. I was always a worshiper. I always had deep, powerful worship since I've been younger. And so he was like, he right. Respect, but still, even that scenario, it was coming from a place where I'm being ridiculed and I gotta be called to the pastor's options. Fast forward a couple years into my 20s, I meet Ant, and my first time going to church, he actually was not there. He had other leaders involved, and they were powerful, and that was even weird because I'm just like, wait, someone's coming to talk to me after church and ask me how my experience was. They didn't send the deacon. This is actually the person that spoke, to actually meet him at his son's football game. So I'm thinking where I'm meeting Ant for the first time, surely I'm going to meet in the office or something like that. And we're meeting in a football field with his son's practice. And I'm already like, what is happening here? Next thing I'm like, I'm having relationship problems at the time. I'm like, man, I'm pretty sure he's going to use his pastoral power to tell me that I need to cleanse myself from sin and break up with this young lady who is now my wife, by the way. That didn't happen. So
obviously that was not his advice to you.
No, I was totally confused, not just by his advice, but his stance as a man, as a pastor. No. And I'm just like, okay, this is weird. I'm meeting with this dude not in the office. I'm meeting him in the football field.
In the office.
And then he was like, yeah, if you ever need anything, call me. I'm like, oh, he said that's the wrong person because so called him. He's like, yeah, come up and meet. And we're meeting. I think Pastor, when I first started, I met Pastor probably 3 times a week, sometimes more than that. Sometimes I bet I do it every day. I'm like, this dude gonna get sick of me because he a pastor. He gotta tell me he got pastorally things to do. And that is, that never happened. And so that's my experience.
I got to go in my office and study.
Yeah, he never did that.
Shine up your Bible.
Studying, he studies a lot. So I will walk into him studying, but it wasn't like it was just a cultural shock. And so I say for me now being the pastor, that's where I pride myself in pastoring from. Is I try to make myself approachable. And I think people have a problem with you being approachable because they want you to fit on Joe's point. They want you to be institutionalized. They just want you to be this.
And that's
go ahead, Andrew.
That was the reason I asked the question. Because I mean, Joe and Ant know this. Any of the Kingdom on the Road listeners probably know this. I don't know if you know TC or not, but Misfit was not a name I chose.
No.
It was given to you.
It was labeled on me.
Yeah.
Because everywhere I have gone in a ministry setting, even before I had finished my degree and gotten commissioned and licensed and everything else, was that the people that recognized, hey, there's something different about this guy, were people outside of the church community.
Yeah.
I have had more people call me pastor that I have never met in person than people that have actually sat and listened to me in the pews.
Yep. That's a wild feeling. That is a
Right.
wild feeling
And
that
it's-
people from across the world are more
Right.
apt to call you pastor than the people in the pulpit.
And
Or
they're
the
more
people in the pews.
comfortable, and they're more comfortable talking to us in general.
Yep.
And I mean, they're part of the reason that, I was laughing a little bit, and you guys probably saw it in the group chat. There's been a guy that's been telling me for 3 days now that I'm not a pastor because I don't have a master's degree and I'm not old enough.
He's one of them.
And because of the fact that a large portion of our following online are people that are not believers,
Right.
but they still are asking and questions about what the scripture is saying and how we are actually supposed to live.
So to that point, that's interesting because I have found myself, because of where the ministry started, where the house church started, who was most likely to feel comfortable walking through the door, and how things evolved from there. There was a very high number of non-believers or people who had previously been a part of the church but rejected it, that were coming across our doorstep, but felt comfortable having conversations with us and engaging with us, and then hearing from other pastors and being like, how are you doing? What does that say about your ministry that you have more non-believers feeling comfortable with you than believers? I'm like, okay, so what I want you to do, right, is I want you to grab your gimmick. It's called a Bible. And I want you to thumb through to what Jesus did and the kind of people Jesus hung out with. I don't mean to derail, because there's several things that have been brought up that I want to talk about.
What I was getting to is the fact, and this is where, because I saw Joe's eyes roll a little bit as well. I would not label Common as trashy because of the fact that trashy is relative.
Yes.
Right. But
I was told part of the reason why I had people in the pews that refused to even acknowledge I was the pastor was because of the fact that I came in shorts and a t-shirt and Nikes rather than coming in suit and tie.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
So, real quick, before we keep this train rolling, the comment section
man,
is keep going. So, Kenji headed out. I'm heading into an event now. God bless everyone. God bless you, Kenji. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to read off Brenda's comment that I brought up before to make a point with Ant. I definitely find myself testing people, pastors, to see if they are legit and actually care. On that note, I for sure feel the love and feel comfortable asking for prayer from Ant. Also, just feel free to chat on here. So thanks for giving that level of love. Brenda, you showed up and showed out yesterday. Hearing from you today, I'm glad that you feel comfortable jumping on these streams, engaging, all of that kind of stuff, because that is exactly what we are shooting for here. We've got Chris Rock, Pastor TC.
Pastor TC, that's my boy.
That's what I call age pride. Yes. Stick a pin in that, because we're heading back there here in a minute.
Please.
Willie G, good morning, G Berry.
Oh
Lord, not the chicken, he says. He says, good morning, family. Good morning, sir. Hope you are doing well this morning. All right, we have Pastor PC again. We got church folk think Since they are older, they know better, but many times they act childish in conflicts or conduct themselves as adolescent.
He went there.
Dude,
Ooh,
Yep.
He's going there.
Bro,
There it
Bro,
is.
he is going there.
you're just teeing me up. Okay. We're gonna come back to this.
I need to get my bell out so we can start.
right.
All right. This has been the first starred comment pinned for the for the stream. You have the first one, Chris. Xandra, good morning, everybody. Good morning to
Morning.
you. Glad you are with us this morning. G-Berry has crumping. Oh man, I feel elderly.
Oh yeah, bro. When I said out my mouth, I was just like, oh, I just aged.
Just dated yourself.
Like, oh, Lord.
Xandra, since when do you need a master's degree to be a pastor? Since you are trying that comes with the necessity of adding your own parameters for your opinion to matter at the table.
Mhm.
And then lastly, G Barry, I'm so glad you said that, acknowledging Common as messy 100%. Okay. So, let's circle back here. I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about. You said Common, you defined Common. I'm glad that you defined Common from where you're coming from and all of that kind of
Right.
stuff. However,
Right.
like Andrew, I gotta voice a different version of Common,
Absolutely.
because there's nuance to all of this conversation,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There is something to having this level of respectability that you can go to this person, you know they're wise, you know they're sage, you know they're seasoned. Okay, cool. But at the same token, all of those same things, all of those same ideologies that lead to to sage and seasoned and wise and all of those kinds of things are some of the exact same ideas that lead to rock star pastors. The
Mhm.
people who come out onto the stage and you are not going to engage with them outside of the time that they spend giving their TED talk on the stage, and you have to go through their secretary to maybe get an appointment 3 months from now. And it's somebody else's role, somebody lower on the pecking order, to do the house calls, to do the meetings, to do the actual pastoral work. It's just their job to teach. It depends on which direction that you go with all of the with those kinds of things. And so to me, with Common is less about being devalued, because that's a subjective thing.
Mhm.
There are some people who look at me, I don't have them in right now, but I usually am wearing earrings, right?
The beard is enough. That's all you had
The
to point
beard-
to, man.
The beard is what it is. We joke about it's my measure of holiness, but there are some people who are like, you heretic, how could you be defiling the temple of your body? You know, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't hide the fact that I have my nails painted. I point me to what thou shalt not paint your nails if you're a man. I missed that one. So I joke, I clown, I make jabs and all of that kind of stuff. But there's a reality to I am who I am, right?
Well, and there's a difference between disrespect in terms of, well, you just don't look the part.
Yeah.
And disrespect in terms of, you don't have the right to tell me that my relationship with God is not where it should be.
Right.
And that I think is also part of where, when we look at even our title here,
Mhm.
if we're talking about common or holy and set apart, common, I don't think we need to be looking at this in terms of outward appearance here. We're talking, are we still in a common state or are we as pastors trying to be holy and set apart, just like we're calling our congregations to?
Amen.
Because the temptation, like you were talking about for these rock star pastors and everything else, is what do I need to do to get the clicks?
Right. Hang on though. Before you go there, because I draw the physical appearance portion of it, because for as much as you're saying that in and of itself is not, it's not so much about that. Oh no, it's very much about that. I don't know if you, for those of you guys that have never met Ant in person and you don't know what this man looks like in person, is a big dude. Like, you see him coming towards you, he's a big cat. And some people are intimidated by that. Some people will not approach him because of that. No, but we hope that these things don't matter. We hope that these things aren't a big deal, but they are. They are a big deal to some people. Just like when we come out here and talk about the struggles and the pains that we go through. Where did we start this entire thing on with Let It Rip? What does it mean biblically to be a man? And where did that come from? That came from our men's panel, because you were one of the younger people who were willing to step forward and ask the questions about, do these terms actually mean anything within the confines of the church? And is this even how we should be conceiving of all of this? Because there's a whole generation of people who like fandoms, who like video games, who look different, who act different, and all of that kind of stuff. But we're childish. We're not the same, because we think about things differently, because we look differently, because we act differently, because it's a different generation, because it's something new. We hope these things don't matter, but these things matter.
Right. I'm saying the disrespect part of it is where it's different in terms of the way we react to it as pastor.
Right. But again, though, you of all people know that sometimes you're pigeonholed. Sometimes you don't get that opportunity to have that nuance. Right. You can react to things internally however you're going to choose. People are going to react or are going to act however they act. You stay the course, right? That's the idea of being of being obedient to Christ. Is you act how you're going to act regardless of how other people perceive you, or how or regardless of how other people act. But hang on, along with all of that, and that's where it squares the circle. That's why I didn't want to necessarily get hung up on just the appearance portion of it, because that's not the only portion that I'm trying to point out here. Part of this whole idea of what does it mean to be a man and for you to be common and all of that. And this is the point that I want to draw out about what I bring to the table as common and all of that is I have when I got into this, when I got into pastoring, when I got into ministering, before I even thought that pastor was a thing associated with me, when it was just about getting in front of the microphone and having raw conversations about God, the one thing that I realized very, very quickly is you can have the rituals, you can have the routines, you can say the words, you can know when to say amen, you can play the game to a T, and nobody will ever know the difference. You don't need God for any of that. Relationship, that's where you need the God portion of it. And this world is craving authenticity. This world is craving real and honest and genuine. And so, yeah, we as pastors look at this and we're like, okay, that how do we should be set apart as we are calling other people to be set apart. Absolutely. But part of this conversation lives and dies on addressing the elephant in the room. That being set apart means I don't sell what's happening to me. I don't sell the things that are going on, the things that make me just another real person. And I will give you
Thank you.
an example, guys. You guys have all heard this. If you guys have heard any of my other shows, you know what I'm about to go into. But here's the God's honest truth: is I have seen enough of this life to not take seriously any of the cliches and all of that kind of stuff. G Berry, why do you always got to come in with paragraphs, bro? Every time, every week.
Dropping bombs.
It's like my entire screen shifted as soon as
He's a rapper, bro. He got
My
spit
TV
lyrics.
shook. It was like boom.
He dropping lyrics. All right.
I remember the first time since taking on the role of pastor that I opened up about Isaiah. Oh, you don't talk about that. You don't. That's not for you to talk. You don't know. And don't you believe that just meant that God had something better for you? God had something better than my son? Are you outside of your friggin' mind? Anyway, that. And if you want a picture of it, when I said that to a room full of ministry professionals and pastors in Colorado, that the reaction says enough about how people within the position conceive of nonsense like that. But I digress. Anyway, so all of that, the appearance, what we're willing to talk about, how we're willing to be open, all of those kinds of things, showing the fact that you are a real person, that's common. Being able to have jocularity and being able to engage and being able to meet people as a whole person, like sitting down and having a meal and sitting down and talking about boxing for 2 hours and movies, that's common. You don't have to degrade yourself. You don't have to. Being common doesn't mean that you sin or you act a certain way or something along those lines. But that's like saying reading the Bible doesn't mean that you have to go into heresy. Like, okay, like that's going so far down the road and being like, whoa, you don't want to do. Okay, nobody said anything about that. So let's just hang out in the right part of town and problem solved. You know what I mean? Like that's
build up your fortress and keep everything else out. It's the Roman model of evagelism versus the Celtic.
Real quick on that one. Joe, you said something, and I'm sorry. I had to jump in here and apologize.
Yeah, go for it.
And I see you. I know you ready. You've been
go ahead.
But yes, that's what I'm talking about. And like I said, I was going to fumble through this conversation because it's a very sensitive and vulnerable place for me. But that part, I am a human being and I have struggles.
Yes.
And when I'm pastoring you, there is this weird expectation that you give me your problems, but if I parallel my problems on how God has brought me through, right? Or if I even say that, hey, that's something that I struggle with to this day. There's this weird, for lack of a better word, church in these words, there's this weird shift in the conversation. Like, oh, well, wait a minute. You a pastor. You ain't supposed to feel. Let me cause be real. I won't get my soapbox. You ain't supposed to feel tired, fatigued, frustrated, angry. You ain't supposed to struggle with lust, arrogance. Let me throw one that's really in there. You're not supposed to feel like quitting.
There it is.
You're
not supposed to not want to take other people's bricks from time to time and want to be able to take a day off. Dude, yeah.
You can't tell me that you get sick of people.
Yep.
Because I'm the people.
Right.
Because I'm the people, yeah.
Because that can I be real with you, gentlemen, and online, and I don't know, man. I just feel like
Please
God's
do.
doing this to me lately. I've been struggling with people lately. I've been for a year now. I hate to even count. Although the Bible says don't hold on to records of wrong, but being human, I've been wounded emotionally. People have hurt me, overlooked me. You name it, for a year.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's just been back to back to losing jobs, even in that capacity, in a Christian faith-based job.
Yeah.
And feeling wounds of rejection and so forth on. And I'm like, God, I want to deal with people. I want to trust people. I want to withdraw in my own little corner, which is me and my wife, and I'm just okay with that.
Yeah.
But God, I realized as a pastor, you called me to serve people because that's how I serve you. So my service is unto you. But the very thing you're calling me to do is the very thing that's hurting me, which is people.
Yeah.
You can't say out loud. Don't tell them about that. They mess around, leave a church. Or if they don't leave a church, watch this now and hear me. They going to fix it. I know some of you can relate what I'm talking about. They have to fix it somehow. Well, Pastor, what can I do? Pastor, maybe I don't need you to do anything. Maybe in this moment, I need you to understand that I'm actually human. And I'm going through a rough time. And as much as I pray and I communicate and talk to you, this is something where we can come together and maybe walk together. But that's what I mean. That's common. You don't get the right to do that. You shouldn't do that. That's too familiar. That because you have to be above me because you're the one that's supposed to help me overcome what you're feeling. And I just don't got it in me, guys. I'm gonna tell you right here on this platform, I don't have it in me. I'm never gonna be that person. If you catch me on the wrong day, I'm gonna tell you I'm having a bad day. And in the same context of conversation, you're gonna hear about how good God is too. But you're gonna hear about my feelings and how I feel. And I'll go ahead and say this because I'm surprised, Joe, you didn't touch the colorful language because you talked about appearance, but I'm surprised you didn't touch language. Because now
why you gotta call me out like that? Why you gotta call me out like that?
I was surprised, okay? But I will go ahead and say this: I have grown. It's just me. I can't say this for anyone else. You pick your thing. I've learned to even change my language. I've learned not to cuss in conversations. I say that for my wife. Ariel Robinson gonna hear a couple F-bombs come out about how TC or Anthony, my name, is feeling about circumstances. She's gonna hear a slew of cuss words. And and then we're going to pray. She's gonna pray for her husband. But with my friends, I've learned to pull back my language, but they do feel the intensity of the anguish and pain. And I'm grateful for my brothers. I'm grateful for even Ant, because me and him meet in a couple hours. There's times where he's gotten raw TC. Yep. Forget titles, forget accolades. This is how I'm feeling. I'm pissed off. I'm angry. Yeah. And I'm mad at the world. Yep. And that's parts of me that I don't hide from people. And I've gotten ridiculed because of this. I've gotten slung because of this. Because whatever you want to say, I refuse to buy into the machine. Pastors are human.
Yep.
I've seen enough of them fall to realize they're human.
Yep.
I see enough sabbaticals. I see enough scandals to know that at the end of the day, these men are human and they weren't talking to no one.
Yeah.
And I'm not excusing the excuse of their folly or anything like that. But I wonder in the back of my mind, so what if they could have talked to someone about it? What if they could have, before they had this scandal, what if they could have felt comfortable to have this conversation?
Well, and part of what you said was that in order for somebody to actually hear the gospel message in your statement as far as how you're feeling that day, They've got to let you talk about why you're feeling the way you are to see how God is still good.
Right.
So, well, you can't even get to the gospel message that everybody's expecting you to give as a pastor because they get distracted by the fact, wait, you mean you feel bad?
Yeah.
But I feel bad. That's why I'm telling you that I feel bad. But you can still hear the fact that God is still good in the midst of all of this.
Yeah.
But they don't even let us get to that part.
Right. And it's interesting to me because I come from and Ant, I'm gonna clear the table here for a second. Piggyback off of TC's thing. Clear the comments, and then the floor is yours because I can see you chomping at the bit.
My bad, bro.
It's interesting because there are a couple of relationships that I have developed over the last year of folks that, like, there's one guy that he's like, oh, wait a minute. You're like a guy. You're like a dude. Like you are a paisan. Like that's one of that, like, but you're a pastor, but you're a guy. Like you're just another one of the guys. And like, I don't know how to describe what I'm saying in language outside of what that means on the East Coast. You know what I mean? Like, and there are other ones where, like, over time of me being vulnerable, of me stepping forward and being like, look, in the words of the great philosopher Kurt Cobain, you're either gonna love me for who I am, or I'd rather you hate me for who I am than love me for something that I am not. I will never be something that I am not. I am with UT. I have zero interest in playing the game. That means that at that same token, in that same context, in all of what I'm talking about, of the benefits of some of the congregation that have been cool with that, at the same token, you've had some of the older folks. And this is something that I have not forgotten. There is a pinned comment talking about the whole age pride thing. We got to go back there, but there are some older folks that absolutely reject somebody like me. And because I'm unwilling to play the game, because I'm unwilling to do this certain level of appearance and all of that kind of stuff. Oh, I know that it has made my contemporaries very uncomfortable because I refuse to allow for room of being anything other than that. Because here, catch this. For all of you guys watching, catch this. Yes, we bleed. Yes, we struggle. Yes, we are human. Yes, we are tempted. But you notice how each one of us here still claims the name of pastor, right? Claim like we are I will speak for every single person on this stream and say that these three other men that I am looking at are all called and qualified. Now, that being said, the beautiful part is that, like Andrew said, there is a beauty in that same person who struggles, who is open, who can be all of those things, still turning around and giving that gospel message and saying, at the end of the day, God is good. So we've got a boatload of comments here.
Two novels by G-Berry.
You guys are doing awesome. Keep it coming. I know I keep joking about the amount of comments, but seriously, keep them coming. All right, G-Berry trying to play as Tolstoy over here. Let me go ahead and pull up. In some of the experiences I've had in negative circumstances, of course, there seems to be a hierarchy. I'm from NorCal. Guys, I know gangs when I see them. These ministers aren't servants. Wow, coming in with the stiff shots. Okay. they're superstars, and anyone who doesn't meet their criteria were viewed as crippled customers, and they capitalized off of the customers because they're the hustlers. This idea of don't get too common with them was a negative connotation
Mhm.
that caused an unnecessary separation due to a distorted, self-righteous point of view. Just my thoughts.
Hmm.
Damn. And he says, I got songs, man. Let it be. Brenda replying to G-Berry, lived in NorCal too. I almost stayed in NorCal. I was in NorCal for a while. I would have gotten lost. I was 18. It was a whole thing. We'll have that conversation one day. Then part 2 of his novella. In positive aspects, I've seen the pastors, leaders, ministers, and family alike are leading by example. They're welcoming, friendly, and reminds me of family. There's disagreements, sometimes loud, sometimes laughter, sometimes crying. There are times we get corrected, redirected, and I just may feel disrespected. But through it all, they stick together through thick and thin. This is what I've observed and what I'm grateful for experiencing within the biblical context and relationships. Then we have Brenda, when a pastor can be real talk about the struggles. For me personally, it's easier to connect and let my own guard down. Yeah, and this is right, wrong, or indifferent. I know that there are people in all 3 of those camps, right, wrong, and indifferent, when it comes to how to operate as a pastor. This is it. You know what I mean? This is what I would look towards. But I get it. Pastors can be put on a pedestal and held to a higher standard. Absolutely. And then we have Kaylin chiming in. Good morning. Glad you are here this morning. Again, like I said, like we've been saying this entire time, if you have opinions, conjecture, if you have questions, any of the sort, feel free to chime in below. We want to hear from you. Let us know where you are tuning in from. Ant, my man, the floor is yours.
Well, there's been so much said, and it's like hard to, like, where do you start, with this? I think the first thing that really jumps out at me as we're having this conversation is that I don't think on a level, if we're leveling up and we say, okay, what people are really struggling with when we talk about this term common versus, set apart. Number one, it is people using language familiar to them to express something. Because, and Andrew will probably jump on this. There's a term in the Bible, koinonia, and it actually means common. It also means fellowship, to share, to have things in common, to participate with one another. And so from a biblical standpoint, the term common is not a negative thing. But from a cultural or social standpoint, what people are looking at as common is something that is unacceptable, that it is too close. And when somebody says too close, it means that, like you guys were saying, you don't need to share your struggles or your sins, but also on the other hand, you don't need to appear like you have no respect for your position or your office or your ministry. You don't want to, treat your office as not a big deal, because we live in a culture, in a context that says, well, I don't care about titles, right? People are railing against titles because in one sense, there's a generation that titles were everything.
Mhm.
Everybody was seeking a title. Everybody was looking to be called something, even to the point where you have people that are reverend, doctor, pastor, evangelist, bishop, so-and-so.
Mm.
Like, okay, how many titles do you have? What is going on here? Why do we need all of these titles? And then you come to a generation that says, I don't care about titles. Just call me Aunt. Right? And then you open up your Bible and you say, well, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This title actually is designating your function and what you're supposed to be doing, not giving you respect because you have it. It's telling people what you're supposed to do.
Right.
It's not there to give you extra kudos. Right? That's why I don't care if people address me in whatever way they address me. Sometimes I introduce myself as Anthony and they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought you were a pastor. Oh, yeah, but we're at a restaurant.
My mom didn't know that when she named me.
Let's have a meal. Let's have a sandwich. We don't need, do we need that? And so there's this idea that when we talk about common, we're talking about, in a person's opinion,
Mm-hmm.
what is acceptable and unacceptable, what is right and what is not right. We're not looking at common as what it's supposed to be, that we share with one another, that we connect with one another, that I can open up to you and be vulnerable to a certain extent, because I don't think you can tell everything to most people. I mean, I think that's just not wise to tell everything to anybody who you're talking to. You have certain people where I have to really say this and I can share this with this person because of the weight of it. Do I hold back that I had a bad day or that I'm struggling or that this is rough? No, I can say that to most people. But then there's things that
Right.
you don't share with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think with pastors, that thing becomes bigger. There's more things that you don't share with everybody. There's larger things. And I think Brenda's comment is interesting because they say pastors are put on a pedestal and held to a higher standard. I don't know if those two things go together. I think being put on a pedestal is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Being held to a higher standard, however,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's biblical. The Bible says that don't let everyone be called a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
because they will be held to a higher standard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes with unpacking the word, expressing what it says. I think all of us on here, when we open up the Bible, we want to be accurate. We don't want to say something that's not right. You don't go into it and saying, I'm just going to say whatever I want with this passage. No, you go into it saying, I want to say, what is right, what is in context, what is appropriate. And so even you are holding yourself to a standard when it relates to that. I think when it comes down to interactions with people, again, Paul said, I'm all things to all men that I might win some. You, as a pastor, I have to be wise enough to know who can handle what when I'm engaging certain people. And so I know a lot of people won't like this, and this is me, and I am at that. I'm actually in that next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I toe that line, that there's a part of me that says, well, yeah, I don't want to just do things just because I can and say the chips fall where they may. I do want to hold to a standard that allows me to walk in as many of the boxes as I can, rather than I'm going to isolate myself to this box. And if those people over there don't care, then, hey, that's on you. But that's me, right? That's me personally. I'm not this is not Bible, right? I'm not saying you, but this is for me. So this is my mindset. I want to be able to, you know, sit at all the tables, you know, and reach people in different, you know, I can go to the hood and reach them. I can go over here and you know, wherever I need to go. And so I think at the end of the day, there's so much subjectivity in this idea of what is common and what isn't, that we all have to kind of pull back and say, you know what? Why not be sensitive to the moment? Why not be sensitive to the circumstance? Why not be sensitive to the situation rather than creating this overarching, this is right over here and this is wrong? Feel the, you ever hear somebody say, are you reading the room?
Right. Take the temperature of the room. Absolutely.
Can you tell that was inappropriate to say that?
Yeah.
Well,
so,
you know, so that's, yeah.
So I think the one thing I will say, Ant, is I think there's a fundamental language difference between what you're saying and what Brenda is saying. And Brenda, feel free to chime in the comments if I'm misunderstanding or misrepresenting what you're saying. When she says put on a pedestal and held to a higher standard, I read that as not from a biblical standpoint held to a higher standard, but held to an unrealistic standard to be something other than human.
Yeah, and that's why I took that part out of it. And for me, put on the pedestal and held to an unrealistic standard is what I would say. I wouldn't say higher standard. So I'm not disagreeing necessarily with what she's saying. Like you said, it's just a language thing. That's why I said higher standard. I'm going to take that and put that over here. And the pedestal piece, you know, yeah, I agree with that line of thinking. So I think it is just a language thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, because he said a lot, and you know, for a lot of it, Pastor, I agree with you, but some of it, I'm just like, I think you made it very clear it's perspective driven.
Yes, it's my perspective. Not
right, absolutely. And I think yes. So let me start with emphaticals. Read the room. I think that's anybody, truthfully, in any position you might be in life, you know. Yeah. But
it should be.
Yeah, should be.
I'll give you that. Should be. So let's start off with the role as pastor, right? Yes, if I am preaching a Sunday sermon, I'm not going to blast in a Sunday sermon that my week I don't know. I gotta find something ridiculous to pull from. This week someone cut me off in traffic and I just gave a whole bunch of middle fingers. I'm like, I don't know. Contextually, I don't think that's going to go well, and I don't think that could distract
pull that off though.
Yeah, one of our pastors a few months ago actually did that. Like he started, and it wasn't even a week ago. It was before it was on his way to church that it happened, and he told us all.
Yeah.
And then it was a good actual analogy to what he was talking about.
But I'm gonna pick on that. And this you're actually proving the point I'm about to point out. For me, that's when we get into semantics of language and the people that you're over or the people that you hang with. For some people, that's gonna be okay, and that's what I'm saying. This was makes this subject so rough. The point I'm pointing to when I was talking earlier is that sometimes you don't even get that right. I think if I be real there's pockets I feel like all of us have on the stream that are very unique to the world. But on a commonly large level, people are just like, you know, someone say that's unacceptable, that you're not even supposed to be working like that. Or this is the other side of this, right? That I was going to touch. Because of the lack of people being so relatable and be able to reach, right? Because I think that's what everybody wants, whether you're a pastor or not. People want to know, can I be heard? Can someone talk to me? And can we be human? You know, I get there's God, but how can you connect with me? How can you relate to me, right? I think that's what a lot of people are asking for outside church, inside of church, is can I be myself without the fear of judgment, right? Without the fear of rejection. Because I don't care who you are, all those things are going to hit you in some form. Now, I think the benefit from us being Christians, in my opinion, is God is there to help us deal with those things that the world is going to give us regardless. But I think it's harder when it's in the church and you get those things. You get rejection. You get people pushing you aside. You get people just putting you on. And I'm going to use the word pedestal. You just get people putting you on the pedestal, and that's it. And you get people using the high standard you have as a weapon. And there's so much you're saying there that I'm just trying to really articulate.
Yep.
But the negative side is that you become reckless. I was watching a video this week because if you don't know, on my channel I react to TikToks now, and there was this pastor who brought his New Year's service in with swagging and surfing, playing a whole bunch of hip hop, and obviously trended off bat because people in the church are like, you're not supposed to play music like that. And I was one of those ones that was like, where's the context? I need to understand why he made this move.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then I heard his response. I was just like, yeah, not the move. You know, but at the same time, having enough understanding, I'm like, this dude's just trying to be common. He's trying to reach people in a common way. But this was very, unfortunately, dangerous. And like I said, that will take me to explain the whole video. That would take me to explain why it was wrong. And I made a whole video about it. To me, that's reckless. I don't think that's okay either. So I don't think being inappropriate to be relatable, to be human is okay, because then you start lowering God's standard.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there needs to be a balance. And that's what I think I'm looking for in my life right now. Where is this beautiful balance? Where is this balance where if someone catches me at the wrong moment and they're asking for their pastor and their pastor's having a bad day, that I'm going to be there for that person. I'm not going to turn away from that person. But in that conversation of teaching and admonishing, there's going to be vulnerability on both sides. A lot of ways, it seems a lot of times, is the transaction is only one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
the person is going to you, right? And you got shoved down what you feel. And I'm gonna be the first person, I'm probably gonna be the unicorn using that says I don't always think that's right. I don't think we should fake it to make it. That's what it looks like to me, is that you're sometimes saying the face, and someone will say, well, yeah, you gotta do that with your regular jobs. Okay, go into your job, let your emotions affect your position and things like that. And I will agree to disagree to extent because yeah, you do, but how much longevity are you going to get out of that? Let's, like, right now I work with special needs kids, and it's emotionally draining sometimes. I had a kid that just broke my heart. He was suffering in so much pain, and I had to pull myself together to get the job done, but emotionally I'm in distress. And I was kind of grateful for our team that we slowed down and talked about that moment. Like, how'd you feel when that happened? Man, I felt like horrible. We got the job done, but that felt horrible. I feel like that's from a secular standpoint. What I usually see experience in churches is you just suck it up and deal with it, and you never go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm trying to find balance. I'm not saying that don't get it done, but I think a lot of times I don't see both. I just see I have this meeting, I got shoved down while I just do it. I got shut down all of the hell that just happened in my life, and I got me with this person, and I dare not say the unforgivable that I'm struggling to even have this meeting. I give the person what they need, and then I just keep on trucking. And it's, to me, that's unhealthy. And again, I will go ahead and say that's subjective, possibly. So I'll go ahead and be fair. But as someone who's a younger pastor who's dealing in a generation with so many emotions, so many identity crises, when anxiety is at the highest it's ever been before in and outside of the church, what does longevity of health look like when we're having these conversations with people? And again, that's what I think it points back to. You know, I know we didn't burn this word into the ground, but common is, that's what I'm usually thinking about, is that people don't want to touch this. And one more thing before I know I feel you guys itching again. I'll never forget when I dealt with anxiety as a leader.
Mhm.
I've never felt so rejected in my life. That was probably the
Mhm.
worst thing I felt
Oh, yep.
because people was like, "How can you do this and then you deal with this?"
Yep.
You know, because my panic attacks were they were aggressive. I am at church. I could literally be done with praise and worship and gasping for air, feeling like I'm about to die in the parking lot. I went to work saying because I just couldn't drive. And that was a rough time because that's probably when I felt the most misunderstood
Yeah.
in a place of leadership. I'm talking about things like that people have mental health issues.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Serving God, and you're supposed to ball that up and just get the job done.
Right.
I don't think longevity in that is going to be healthy. And I think there has to be a better way. And like I close, I agree. I don't think everyone should know your business, but someone should. But what happens if you can't find the someone?
Right.
Right. And
Well,
that's
my-
why I wouldn't throw out the higher standard part of the conversation, Ant, is because we need to address how that has been misappropriated. Just because it has a solid biblical context doesn't mean that we throw it out, because for everything that T just said, that level of unrealistic expectation that's held on leaders, especially those of us who are younger, and the fact that the older generation looks at us, and I'm not vaguely saying you, Ant, I'm saying older leaders look at us like, oh, you're just one of those millennials who's too soft,
Right.
who's too emotional, who's too all of those kinds of things. That idea that you just got to shut that down, that I ain't got time to bleed, and all of that kind of stuff. No, that's a very real conversation that needs to be a part of this if we are going to, like T said, figure out a healthy way of being able to adopt this idea as a lifestyle going forward, and not just something that we say, ah, crap, all hell is breaking loose. Crap just hit the fan. I got to break glass in case of emergency. And now's the time where I shut myself down and I don't bleed.
And that's where so my boy Antoine is the one that gave me this phrase. I think it was like episode like maybe 10 or 11 of getting started with Misfits. Is he talking about, yes, pastors are shepherds. That is our job. That is our goal. But we're sheep too.
Yeah.
And that is where, yes, we have a higher calling as shepherd. But we've got other shepherds shepherding us. And they've got
Or at
other
least we should.
shepherds shepherding them. And ultimately, the good shepherd is shepherding all of us.
Yeah.
And
That's how it
that's
should
where
be.
when we remember the fact that we're sheep, not just shepherds, there's room for us to be able to say, okay, something is not right here. I've got to have somebody I can go to, whether that's somebody in my congregation or somebody else. This is why within the CSRM world, we talk about it, the relationship levels within discipleship, is you have Paul's, you have Timothy's, and you have Barnabas's. Paul to Timothy is I am teaching you. Timothy to Paul is, I am learning from you. But Paul and Barnabas were equals that were able to encourage each other. And we're able to listen to each other. And we're even able to disagree with each other. And that is what is missing in a lot of these conversations, is the fact that because we do isolate and shut down because we're afraid that if we don't, something is going to come out that causes us to no longer be able to be said, well, you are not qualified for this.
So, real quick, I've got a question, but before we get there, I want to catch back up on the comments.
Yeah.
Brenda
Can I get
commented,
Anthony Young's when you get there?
yeah.
Because he does a lot.
Brenda was commenting based off of what you were saying, and she says, I don't mean me personally, And she said, I mean, I see it in larger churches. I don't. I don't mean to speak for you, Aunt, but just knowing your style and all that kind of stuff, I don't think he was saying you personally were saying
No.
were saying those things.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So this one, Andrew,
Yeah.
titles. Okay, I gotta take it off to be able to read
Yeah.
the whole thing. Titles are there for a reason. I remember saying to God, I'm not interested in titles. God explained elevation comes from above. I believe that's Psalm 75:6. One of you guys, if you know, feel free. I'm not entirely sure right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
God stated to me that titles is something people identify. Because you have a title does not mean acting entitled and puffed up.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
go.
So here's the thing with that, and this is something that I learned within the first year of ministry as an intern, because the guy that was over us was a reverend doctor.
Reverend Doctor, yeah.
And part of when people talked to him in the church, they called him pastor. When he was out in the community, he introduced himself just as Chuck. When the schools were calling saying we need a counselor, he said, okay, are you calling for reverend or are you calling for doctor of psychology?
Right.
When he was going to the city council because there was a major issue that needed addressed, he made sure people recognized this was reverend doctor. The titles were pulled out when needed.
Yeah.
Based off of the situation, which is part of what he's talking about. And this is part of why within the Misfits world, when guests come on, we make sure to reference them by the title they have earned, because they have earned it. Earning it is something where you are able to put it in front or at the back, depending on what it is, of your name to show people the level that you have reached. It doesn't necessarily mean acting entitled or puffed up until your identity is just, I am doctor. So you address me as doctor.
Right.
And if you don't address me as doctor, you are now insubordinate.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then we have, I don't know if I'll be, I'd say this stuff. Apostle Anthony, some of the most influential bishops / overseers I know that carry some of the most international influence introduce themselves as their first name and reach to shake hands. Once upon a time, Kirk Franklin said in so many words, we're so worried about our titles that we have forgotten our names.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, being in Andrew, I know that you can speak to this. In international ministry, it becomes this thing where you can kind of differentiate people very, very quickly within our world based off of the people who are just a Chuck or versus somebody who is Reverend Dr. Smith so-and-so. Because if you are doing it for accolades, first off, you're in the wrong type of ministry. Just throwing that out there.
You're already on the wrong foot. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. But B, it's boots on the ground sort of ministry, I guess, is a good way of putting it. It's just an entirely different world than putting up a building and throwing up in the sign and saying, here we are, come to our building, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's just an entirely different world that in a lot of ways levels the playing ground when it comes to titles and accolades and all of those kinds of things.
In an international context, anytime I'm talking with international Christians, the address is brother.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. And same thing, when we have international meetings within the CSRM network and Dr. Linville is there, when they need an answer to a question, it's Dr. Linville. When they are sharing about a testimony, it's brother.
Yeah.
And it's it's something that, I as a white pastor going into black neighborhoods is one where I don't introduce myself as a pastor.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
something
no.
they have to give me that title.
Mm.
Me going into white neighborhoods, me saying, yeah, I'm a pastor around here, that's it has a different hit, a
Yep.
different
Yep.
effect to it, because the cultural differences are there as well with these titles.
Right.
And that's the part that, again, we don't talk about the cultural side of the titles and why they're there. We just look at it as, well, this is a pastor, so he just is this.
Right.
Even though we look at, you already talked about Ephesians 4. It's just on the list.
Mhm.
It's not anything more than it's on the list as far as this is the set of gifts that you have been given.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're calling is this is pastoral ministry as opposed to an apostleship or a prophetic ministry, because it's a different set of gifts. That's all it is. But within different cultural settings, the word itself carries different connotations and different weights.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, I think you're hitting it
Yeah.
right on the head, because I think that's the real issue, right? And I'm going to use an example that I know Joe is not a fan of military, right? But in the military, when you're out there fighting a battle, it's important to know who's in what position, because it helps you to relate to that individual, because I know who this guy is, and he comes and he says, here, do this. I'm like, oh, so he has not only the training, but he has the right based upon who sent him to do X, Y, Z. In a church context, people have created their own idea of what people are supposed to do. So people are confused. They don't know. I'm like, well, what, I'm going to create my own idea of what a pastor is supposed to be. And I'm going to hold that pastor to that standard.
Yeah.
Right. And so because I've created my own, now you have to do what I think you should do, not what the Bible says you should do, not what. And so when I say pastor, maybe I feel like, that's not strong enough. I'm going to be a master pastor. I'm being funny, but this is actually happening in places,
Right.
because people want to make you emphasize who they are because they have their own idea of what this is.
And
I
that's
think,
why a lot of younger pastors are refusing the title of senior pastor.
yeah, it's like, don't do that to me.
They'll
Right.
take lead pastor, so that way, like you said, people know when people are coming into the building, they know who they need to talk to that's authorized to make decisions.
Yeah.
But they don't want to be the senior pastor, because they're not the senior
Right.
pastor.
Because I'm not the
They just
senior
happen
pastor.
to be the pastor that is overseeing other pastors at the moment. But it
Right.
doesn't mean that I outrank them or that I'm more qualified than them. It's that my gifting of administration may be a little bit higher than theirs, which is
So
why
I
I'm
fulfill this role.
filling this role while they are doing things that I cannot do. We are a body. That's the whole point.
And that's the point I'm pointing at, is that at the end of the day, we are a body. Roles, I'm going to say roles are important. What God called to be. That is, there's scripture for that, so that we won't be tossed to and fro by any wind of doctrine. So these roles matter. These gifts, they do matter. But since we're talking about pastors, in my fits, and I used to hate this analogy, I'm coming to have more of a love than hate relationship with it. And you actually talked about this in your sermon, is we were talking about the gift ministries. But pastors, the more I'm thinking about it, are more like doctors and nurses. But they actually be more pickier, more like nurses. Because they're going to be the first person you talk to what concerns any form of ailment in your life. That's why people look at pastors like they're like, I have to tell my pastor what I'm going through, or I need this. If I even look at it in the sense that the way the Bible always uses figurative language, like shepherds, right? Because they're talking about their culture at that time and dealing with sheep. You know, they're around. The point of both analogies, they're around people. They know what people are going through. They know what people feel. But I think a lot of times the disconnect is that pastors forget that they are people too. So it becomes a weakness sometimes that if I don't realize how much of a human I am, then I can't even let the power of God flow through my broken humanity, which God came to redeem and even save.
Right.
So when I'm talking to people, for me, again, that's where I'm pulling from. If you're talking to me about anxiety, I'm like, the same God that delivered me and is keeping me now in my when I deal with anxiety is the same God that works and can deliver through your anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but if I'm too caught up and I can't tell this person I have anxiety, then now I feel like I'm limiting the power of God flowing through.
Right.
And I'm just saying, I think what everyone's saying is powerful, like especially what both of you are saying about cultural differences. It's powerful because it is different from every culture.
Yeah.
I will dare say I feel like I don't want to just limit this to African American culture, but I really feel like I've seen more patch, don't bleed mentality. So patch,
no, I agree.
Get going, and maybe
throw some dirt on it.
Right. And maybe when you get older, you get the right to retire. Maybe. You know, but for the majority, this is your heel, this is your cross, this is where you die, this is where you go. And being younger, I used to be like, yeah, I was pumped. I'm like, that's what's up. You know, we don't got time for weakness here. We don't got time to be soft here. You know, all gas, no break,
no breaks
in here. My gospel, my Bible. Okay, Kevin Hart reference is done. So you embrace that, you know. As a man, I would even say you're like, oh yeah, that's it. But then you start living. You start feeling pain, and then you start feeling isolation because of that mentality. Because hey, you all gas no break. You got time to be weak, so you definitely can't talk to nobody. And then you get something happens because I'm in my 30s now. Then you really get in your 30s, and you're like, I don't think this is working. And if I continue to go like this, I might resent the very thing that I once loved.
Yep.
I love the Lord, brethren, and I love my people.
Mm-hmm.
I love my church, Sure Foundation Community Fellowship. I love my people.
Yeah,
I love the people I go to work with. But if I don't fix, I'm just speaking real time, if I don't let the Lord deal with these issues, I can hate the thing that he loves. And to me, that's more dangerous, is when you begin to hate the thing that God loves. Because before I ever loved it, God loved people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before I ever pastored a congregation, God was already pastoring. He loved these people. And if I don't get this, then I might miss out on what he's doing.
So let me meet you where you're at, T, and just and second that notion as another pastor in his 30s. I have the ability to be able to see here where everybody is tuning in from which channel and all of that kind of stuff. I see the number next to Kingdom on the Road, and I know who likely is here. So hear me. Listen to the entirety of what I'm about to say. Do not isolate any part of what I'm about to say.
Gotta love disclaimers before he's about to say something.
Right.
I have been in the process of the last year. I have been in a situation where I have learned a lot. A lot of things have happened good, bad, and indifferent. And I love the church. I love the people. There have been a lot of situations that have been that have led to awesome relationships and all of that kind of stuff. There have been a lot of situations where I know that if I keep going as I'm going, I will come to resent being a pastor. I will come to have an incredible distaste, and I will go back into my shell like I was before. Something needs to change. That is why major shifts are coming for my life, and why I'm leaving this position and moving on and doing different things, because things need to change. Because it's just that's not every single fit. But I'm trying to add some. I'm trying to highlight the nuance of what you said, T, because just because something needs to change doesn't mean that you are disgruntled or hateful or spiteful towards everybody that's involved.
Right.
There's nuance there.
Can I?
And yeah, but
because unfortunately, this is something that I have too much experience in.
yes.
Having to leave somewhere when the call that God has placed on your heart will not be accepted. This is what Matthew 10 actually is talking about as far as what it means to kick the dust off your sandals and move on when they will not receive the message.
Right.
It is not about a feeling of disrespect or a feeling of I'm not wanted. It is something where the pain you feel is for the fact that God has given you a clear vision that you can physically see. And now you know it will never be seen by anybody else. And not because you are not qualified, but because the other people that were involved did not want to listen to what the Spirit was telling them. And so it's not a matter of anger or resentment for a group of people. It ends up being a mourning for a community that is not going to receive the benefits of what God was wanting to do there. And that's why, I've said before, I would love, after leaving a place, to be able to receive a call saying, I told you so. I've never gotten that call. The calls I get are from a mother saying that her son, who we finally were able to get back in school, and he was starting as a freshman on the varsity football team. I get a call saying, "Oh, he just got shot." I get the call of, "Oh, the entire school is shutting down, or the church itself no longer exists." That kind of feeling and everything is one where it's not, if we let it be resentment, we are going to burn out, because resentment means that we are holding it.
Yep.
And that it was about us. What it is a mourning for the fact that what God had shown us is not going to be able to be seen by these people, and people are not going to receive the benefit. And so then we have to ask the question, well, where else are we going to go? Which is what Jesus asked the disciples, and they say, where else can we go? You are the Son of God, the living God. We cannot go anywhere else. And so we patch up to allow the Spirit to renew and rejuvenate while we look to where God is taking us next.
I want to catch up on the comments. Brenda says, the division between people and pastors, yes, a respect is due, but I see those who demand it and have an I'm better than all you people attitude.
Yeah.
They're not pastors.
No,
Those
not.
Right.
No.
That's just the bottom line.
They're not.
There's a difference between a title and a calling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good
Anthony Young says that's good. Willie says, I'm so glad we're talking about this because this is needed. Aquila says, hey, y'all. Good morning. Glad you are with us. Jonave says, oh, wow. I'm surprised that all fit on there. Okay. If someone has obtained a professional title that has been earned and substantiated by a committee or board, not just themselves, that usually has taken a higher level of work and effort. So us acknowledging that has been earned is just respectful.
Yeah, I think there's some meaning to that though.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, I think that's what you were referring to. Yeah.
That was what I was referring to. Is why within Misfits we give people their titles when they have them, because they earned it. It doesn't mean that you necessarily take everything they say as far as, well, they are the ultimate authority on something.
Yeah.
That's where the nuance comes in, as far as, they're recognized, but are they recognized just because they answered the test correctly, or are they recognized because they actually are the expert here?
That's why I would say yes with an asterisk.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. I loved Jesus's leadership style. Also, good morning, Chris. Glad you are with us. I don't think I've read a comment from you yet. I love Jesus's leadership style. It was compassion, love, and servanthood, to name a few. I thought he worked very well with different personalities like Peter, Judas, and John. He appeared to be very approachable, free of insecurities, and didn't need to demand respect. Yeah. And then G. Berry, to this day. Not sure what he was referring to.
He was talking about what I was talking about.
To this day.
All right. So, how do I say this? Ant, you made a comment before about how, Joe, I know you disagree with military, but, and then used an example.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's unnecessary. That's part of why I don't like it when I'm talking about Christian conversations. I think it's unnecessary. I think it just muddies the water. I think there's absolutely no reason to bring in military allusions into a Christian conversation, because it doesn't break down like that. The leadership structure doesn't break down like that. If you can, if I will submit to the idea that having the accurate, clearly defined role of an individual or position is needed. That goes into what the rest of the actual point that you were making was. But I think the point stands by itself. I don't think you need the military illustration at all.
I'll change the illustration then to more of my field. This is why within an athletic team, the captains have the C on their chest. Is because that they are designated to be able to make decisions that the rest of the team are not allowed to make. And they are leaders, but they are leaders that at the same time are leaders because they fit the role that they are put in, not because they are higher than anybody else, but because of the fact that this is where their skill set is at.
I'm sorry, I got to say, I don't think any illustration really fits it. Just to be perfectly honest, I think any of the illustrations fall apart.
I just figured that it would be more acceptable than the military for you.
I get what you're saying.
The point is defining, as you said, Joe, defining what this role is. That's the point is. And for most people, where is that in our world where we define what role is this role as it relates to this role? I could have, but any analogy, right? Anybody can poke holes in any analogy. Paul uses athletics,
and
right?
and military.
Paul uses military.
Good soldiers.
He uses all different types of analogies. So I don't think any analogy is off limits, but I don't think any analogy is going to be perfect. So I agree with you in that sense. I just threw my disclaimer out there because I knew as soon as I said military that, if you were on the stream, I wouldn't even said that. I would have just said the analogy. I mean, so I was doing that out of well, I don't want to, just throw this out there as if, everybody on here agrees with it, because I know that you don't. So that's all I was doing.
Well, I think, but again, I stand by the fact that when we are trying to define these things, throwing out analogies and all of that kind of stuff just muddies the water. It just needlessly complicates everything, because this is already a complicated topic. And so trying to pull in something that has nothing to do with anything is just something that is, I don't care. Like, I feel like my point is getting lost on, I'm just the guy that doesn't like military, so that's why I'm throwing shade on this. No, I throw the same amount of shade on the athletic thing. I don't think captains, I don't think saying that using the captain analogy is any better than using the military analogy, because yeah, sure, you could throw some, if you squint and cock your head a little bit, then maybe this makes sense. No, like let's just stick to the conversation at hand, because as we continue on trying to talk about these things continue to get messier and messier and messier the more we try to make illustrations to other things, when we are obviously already in territory where people don't really have a solid ground on which to be able to really build a foundation of what does this mean? What does that mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? So I don't care. It's not about it being, I don't like military. It's about, there's no reason to confuse the issue in an already confusing issue. Like, we look at the Bible and we can point to chapter and verse, right? Every one of us here can point to, okay, so this is where the Bible talks about the qualifications of a pastor. Okay, I think any one of us could do that. And name the subject matter. We could give us a minute. We'll figure it out. We know how to read our Bibles. Okay, fine. That's us. Now, I'm not saying we are elect. I'm not saying we're special. I'm just saying that we've taken the time to learn how to read our Bibles and how to study them. Anybody can do that. Literally anybody can do that. But throwing in some kind of outside extra biblical example like that doesn't need to be done. Just point to where it says in the scriptures. That's my only point. You could say that about, you could say MDs, right? I've used the field medic versus hospital doctor analogy countless times until I realized it doesn't really work. That I've said that I'm more of a field medic than I am a hospital doctor. That doesn't really work. So you can use, I would say this about any of those things. So it's not just me railing against the military or political or whatever, and me playing into that trope. You know what I mean? So I don't want to. I wanted to address that. I don't want to have this become a conversation, like a whole on conversation about whether or not we should use analogies and things like that, because I'm sure out of the people that are watching and out of the panel and out of people and all of that kind of stuff, there's plenty of people who disagree with everything that I'm saying right now. That's cool. I don't care. That's fine. Like, I don't mean I don't care as in I disregard your opinion. I mean, it doesn't bother me that that somebody else disagrees with me. I just think for sake of trying to keep it clear, it's unnecessary.
And I think part of what you're talking about there is actually part of why this discussion has to be happening anyway. Is that it's not even just around pastors. You know, this is something I've been working for a couple of months on trying to figure out how to word this. We're hoping to have the discussion here at the end of the month on Misfits, as far as the idea of the church just doesn't fit any kind of, the idea of Christian as an adjective just does not fit within any kind of worldly ideas or attitudes or anything, because everything that we do as a church is different from every other system out there. It does not fit. And so it does not make sense when it is not in a Christian context.
Let me say. Oh, go ahead, though.
And that's part of why when we talk about analogies, even though they are helpful, they at the same time can cause the water to be muddy, because we can't use a worldly system or even a neutral system that is in the world. I'm not saying worldly as in it's sinful. I'm saying a neutral system within a world context to be able to perfectly describe what it is we're talking about here. TC, you had mentioned at one point the idea of, we can't, when you go into a normal day job, you can't have this attitude. So why would you have it going into your job as the pastor? Well, our job as pastors in terms of a career is not the same thing as any other kind of career level job. Because we're not there for us. We're not there for building a 401k. We're not there for building wealth. We're not even there to be a part of that church community. Mm-hmm. Our ministry is, and this is one of the things that it took me a while to figure out what it actually meant until I actually saw it firsthand. Pastors, when they are going into a church, unless you are the planning pastor, that church is not your church. That church belongs to God first, and to that community. You are an outsider coming in to partner your ministry with that congregation, to see the vision that God has for that church. And so that's why if God calls me to leave, I have to be willing to let go what we've got here and trust that God's going to keep it going and move on to the next church that he's called me to. Because that ministry, the ministry of that church is not my ministry. My ministry is to the people in the church. And that church is there for their community and is doing things for their community, assuming that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're there for the community. Mm-hmm. And so it does not make sense in any other context outside of a renewed mind of the Spirit that allows us to be able to do what you're talking about, Joe, as far as being able to, you ask us a question, we can say, give me a second, we can find the answer together here.
I think to take more of a neutral stance, I hear both sides. So, but it goes to the point I was making earlier. I just feel like we hit it, but it's like, we had to talk about appearance. I know we didn't want to go there, but we had to. Because appearance is how people perceive. Where we want to believe it or not, people are very visual people in this world, in this culture, especially more so in this culture where everything is visual. That's what social media is all about. It's even proven that the more we go into social media generation, that people prefer certain visuals.
Yeah.
Never in a million years I thought 3 screens on one video will be appealing to somebody, but people love this stuff. So visual representation matters, which goes into our presentation physically. So there was no way as a pastor you're going to escape past this, that people see pastors as a certain way, literally.
Right.
And then you have language, which I think this is the nuance we're stuck on, which can include analogies and so forth on. I don't know if it's so black and white on both sides. I think where we're getting to is that understand the people you're responsible for. My heart's desire is globally for us as a church, globally, to get to a common place where the role of pastor is respected, but at the same time, the role of the man behind the role that God has called is accepted as well. There seems to be a divide there, that people can be pastors, but their humanity is isolated, which gives us a lot of unhealthy churches, in my opinion, where you see pastors struggling, you see their congregants struggling, you see inappropriate behavior, because in my belief, there's a lot going on in that area of humanity. I think John LaVey's point is actually even good, but just to be on the other side of it, to be a little bit of devil's advocate, if you would, sometimes people feel like when they do work hard for a top position, they should be more comfortable, so that way they don't have to put more work in. So there's a different side to that. And you see that in the church. You feel like people, because they went to seminary school, they have their doctorates or whatever, that they don't have to be so familiar with people. So they literally get their career, but there's no humanity in what they're doing, which is the actual reversal of what a pastor is. Because again, like I said, when we look at the role of a pastor biblically, is to dwell with your people. Is to care for your sheep. I don't care how much you know or what you don't know. If you're not doing that, you're not pastoring. If you're not shepherding your people, if people can't approach you, if you can't, like Jesus and so many different analogies of scripture use, take care of your sheep, then you're in trouble. So there's that side of we're talking about words. They do matter. But then, not to pick at Joe, we gotta be careful, because Paul will straight up use an analogy. And 2 Timothy just kept ringing in my head, where he says, he said, endure suffering as a good soldier. Paul is using a worldly analogy, and he's bringing it to a God point. He says, anyone concerned with the affairs of this world, he tells you to endure as a good soldier. And then you use athletes competing. And so we see these analogies in the Bible. For a conversation like this, I'm going to go ahead and say, and maybe I'm just trying to be the peacekeeper, I don't know, that all of it's needed. Because you're going to have to talk to people for wherever they are. But the goal, if I had to draw a goal today, the goal is for both people to connect the bridge. There's a disconnect in our communications between pastor and people. And that's even been proven in this chat, is that people don't know how to go to their pastors, and pastors don't know how to be human. We have tricked ourselves into being something more. Now, if you ask a pastor, like, well, do you think you're more than human? They're going to say, well, no, obviously I'm human. But if you look at the conduct and the behavior, and maybe that's just me because I'm a person that in the profession I'm in, even right now as I speak to you, I have to look at behavior. I work with behavioral kids, work with kids with autism. I've worked with kids like that before a couple of years ago. And every time I feel like God places me, I'm going to say God places me in these positions at my job, I start studying behavior, start looking at how people conduct and behave. And it's very interesting. I feel like there is a huge disconnect that behaviorally, as a church, we're struggling. And I do concur that we should not be niched down, and I'm going to use the word niche, or bottled down by titles and nuances from the world. The church should not. I think that's awesome, but that's a different stream, because we'll have to talk about how those worldly concepts have actually weakened the church, which, to my analogy earlier about a pastor doing swag and surf, why is that your only creative way to be innovative? Well, and then defend it with, well, I outsold somebody. I got more souls. I got more people to come to the cross to defend. But see, even that points to the culture shock of, well, how's the church relatable? Because we're so, how can I word this? Help me, Holy Spirit. Because of our refusal to show our humanity, we're actually almost, I'm gonna use the word almost because I don't want to make this a solid point. We're almost pushing away the power of God.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is God's power is not enough, because God, the way people portray God in the church is that God can deal with certain type of sin. I don't care if you're a leader or if you just someone going to church. So he's untouchable. So God's untouchable. So God's our first pastor. God's untouchable because he doesn't like this. So I can't go to him. That starts with our view of God, right? So I can't go to God because he's untouchable. He's unrelatable. Discount the fact that Jesus wrapped himself in humanity. He went through all the things that we felt, and he overcame them. But I can't come to God. That trickles down to being the pastor. So I have to dummy him down to be more relatable. So then this is where it gets negative, right? So I have to find ways to make this guy who's so high relatable. And now it trickles down to the pastors or those who are serving. I have to find a way to be relatable, but now I'm being reckless.
Mm-hmm.
There's never this beauty of balance that God is holy, but in his holiness, he wrapped himself in humanity, so he understands what we feel, and he tells us that we can overcome. And now pastors, it's the same thing, because you represent him, or anyone in leadership, you represent God. You go through things, but the power of God is not knowing your life, and now you can give that to people. It sounds simple, right? I'm making this sound simple, but we overcomplicate it, or we overlook it because we get caught in certain nuances. And this is this stream to show that there's certain nuances that people get so caught up on that they can't realize that at the end of the day, we're human with all these different experiences and background, trying to figure out this walk with Christ, trying to show God's power and his will while we're here on earth. Let your kingdom come and your will be done here as we're in earth. Letting God's power be demonstrated in our life through all these different experiences. And that is tricky. Sorry, I'm in there.
Oh no, you're good. I would. The only thing I would change that is I would flip the cause and effect here, because I think part of the reason why people assume that they cannot go to God is because of the fact that we have, for whether it's the church that did it, whether it was the culture that did it, whether it was ancient history going back into the Middle Ages that did it, whatever. It's the stuff we've been talking about, is the idea of that if the pastor is unapproachable, then if I can't even take my sin to the pastor, and I have to change all of my behavior whenever I'm around somebody with the title of pastor, then of course God isn't going to listen to me. We have taken we sit in the middle, and when people look at us and we are unapproachable and we are unwilling to listen, we are unwilling to love, we are unwilling to walk with somebody, how are they ever going to think that somebody that we're saying is much holier than us and is perfect in his will and everything else? How are they going to be able to take it to him? And the amount of the homeless guys that I would go pick up to bring in, they were afraid to come into the church because of the fact that they didn't have long sleeves to cover up the tattoos.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them why, and they said, because God isn't going to listen to me if he can see them. I was like, where did you get that? And he's like, well, that's what everybody else in this service seems to think. Because they are so focused on the tattoos, they don't see me. So how is God going to see me if he's even more holy than they are?
Wow.
So we are the cause of why people don't want to come to meet who God is. Because if we are unapproachable, how is our God going to be approachable?
Right, and that's the point I'm drawing.
Right, that's everything
right.
You said was good. I was just flipping the cause and effect here.
Right.
There's a flip side to that, because when you are approachable, people then take you for granted.
Yes. Talk about that.
And they'll mistreat you because
Yes.
You're not, standoffish or, you know, get on my calendar kind of person. You're a person that, hey, you can call me anytime. It's like, that's not a pastor.
Right.
That's not how pastors operate. Pastors don't let people, act like that around them. Like, pastor, that new guy in the men's group said a cuss word. I'm like, okay, he's new. He just started. He's not even, I don't even know if he's saved yet. He's coming to learn. So he might drop,
Well,
but afterwards they're looking at you like, you let him do that.
right.
It's like, well, we're working with him. He's got a long way to go, but he's coming, he's growing. Those type of things will work themselves out. But then you'll be looked at as, well, I don't think he's a real pastor if he allows people to be human around him, right?
Right.
That's what got me in trouble at one point. It was something very similar of, oh, this guy over here is, are you going to let, and so my response was, do you know his name?
Right.
It's like, before you come trying to tell me that this guy doesn't belong here, can you even tell me his name?
Right.
Because I know his name.
Mm.
Do you know his name?
And not only do I know his name, I know his story.
Right.
You don't know what this person's been through.
Right.
You don't know what it took for them to even be sitting here right now.
Right. So here's a question to something that you had said before, and a while back now at this point. You had mentioned where Paul says to be all things to all people, and I don't put myself in this box and all of that kind of stuff. I fundamentally believe that I know the answer to this, but again, being the moderator of the show, teeing up this concept to be dialogued and all of that, do you view guys like T and I talking about how we are unapologetically human, that we will be ourselves, and like being committed to being ourselves within the confines of the pastorate? Do you view guys doing that as guys putting themselves in a box that says, okay, you might not like me, but I'm going to do this anyway?
I don't know if I can reach inside somebody's brain and say what they're doing, but I think it can appear that way. I think it can appear that, hey, I don't care about those people over there. I only care about these people because these are the people that, get me, right? These are the people that get me. But, I can't go inside a person and say that's what they're thinking, because they may not be thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
They may be just voicing how they feel, at the end of the day. When I say all things to all men, I mean holding, the standard of love, no matter where I'm at, biblical standard of love, where I'm at, and being able to listen, relate, take time with, I don't care who it is, even if they are totally different from me, I'm going to engage that person. And they may even say things about me that are not true because they don't know me, because I look different.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I'm going to hang out there long enough for them to see that, well, maybe I was wrong about you. Maybe just because you are different, you got to, you're on a stream with a do-rag on. Does that mean that I don't know anything? Does that mean I don't have any theological teaching that I don't know? Well, hang out a little bit and get to know me before you. And I'm that type of person when it relates to other people, is that I'm going to hang out a bit. I'm not going to let, as they used to say, don't let the smooth taste fool you. I'm not going to, let what I initially see of that person cause me to say, well, I'm not called to reach that person because they're not like me, right? I got a guy in our men's group that's a parkour, right? He does parkour.
It's cool.
Really, really cool to me. Other people are like, I don't even know what that is. So learn about it. Engage this guy. Let's get to know him. Another person who's a skateboard. I got a guy up here that's a gamer, right?
Mhm.
I'm not a gamer, but do I push that away and say, well, you know what? Because he's not into sports, I you know what? I don't have to, mess with him. So that's my thinking. So when you say, do I think that stance suggests that, I think it can be seen that way from the outside, but nobody knows your heart, because that might not even be what you're saying at all.
So one of the churches we were at, we were there to the entire purpose we were there was to rebuild this church. It was dying, it was old, everything. Part of why my wife and I were the family that was selected to go up was because of the fact that this was an all-white church in the middle of a non-white neighborhood. And I was the only one that they knew that was going to be able to try to bridge that gap. And the problem, though, was that me being me, up on the stage in, something like this, I preached one Sunday in a Browns jersey and sandals on. The reaction from the elders and from the few congregants that were left were, you aren't taking this seriously. You're not holy enough. And they started listing the problems, including the fact that I walk with a limp. They assumed that was trying to be gangster, not the fact that I had my knee replaced, knee surgery 8 years ago from catching for 20 years. They had a problem with the way I talk. It's like, I can't change the way I talk, and it's also kind of weird for people in the Midwest to think another Midwesterner has an accent.
Oh my God.
These sort of things. But what they also were not recognizing was that within the first 2 weeks of me being there, because of the fact that I wasn't up there in a suit and tie, because of the fact that I wasn't talking above people, and because of the fact that I was walking around the neighborhood, was that suddenly the demographics of the church were already shifting. And so when I asked them, why is this an issue for you? Their issue was that it was distracting. It wasn't holy enough. It's like, then why is suddenly the community coming, and not coming to make a statement, but they are coming and they are listening, and they want to be involved, and they want to get to know you, and they want to have fellowship. We're back to common as far as koinonia. Mm-hmm. And that's where, as far as with me, that was always where the line had to be drawn of, if the congregation is saying you need to change something about you because we don't like it, we can listen to their reasoning. And if it's something along the lines of, you don't understand something about this community, of where you look like the guy that abused 6 people over here, then all things, all people means, okay, then I need to change. If it's, you are distracting me from being able to worship because I need to feel like this is some holy sanctuary instead of a gathering of the saints, which makes it a holy sanctuary, then the issue is not with my dress. The issue is with where your heart is when you're coming into worship. And so I don't need to make the change here because I'm being who God has called me to be in this situation. You now need to pray and reconcile what it is that God has called you to be in this situation. It's a fine line, but it comes back to like Ian was saying, it's the motivation of the heart for one.
Right.
But then beyond that, it's also what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to make statements, or are we trying to be genuine and be the people God have called us to be, so that we can actually make kingdom level differences within the community that we've been placed.
And that I concur, because I know the question was intended for Ant, but I think, or you says overall. Sorry, misread that. My bad.
That's not play. That's fine.
I think again, man, Andrew, that was good. That should be the focus. Is because, man, I gotta get ready to go pretty soon, y'all. But there's no way we can't skate around while talking about trauma either.
Right.
And what I realized about myself, and then I'm going, like I've been doing this whole stream, is using myself as a catalyst to express. Trauma can make you, it can double your rejection that people are sometimes, I'm put sometimes, intentionally doing or intentionally doing. Sometimes people are just people and they just don't know you. And they don't know that a certain mannerism is rejection for you. And I never died until I really started paying attention to myself, to the power of the Holy Spirit, that trauma would be a thing that would affect my pastoring. That someone rejecting the way I might talk. Someone rejecting that I word this. I am overly enthusiastic in my expressions, right? When someone does it, that might make me feel like I'm not heard. So it can go to my pastoring, like this person doesn't respect me as a pastor. And that can be a huge misunderstanding. It can just be this person doesn't know you. I think a lot of times for people my age, and that is unfortunately a plight of ours, is Joe, I feel like we're right in the middle of two interesting but powerful generations. And both are emotionally can leave scars. You have the generation before us that they didn't believe in mental health. So we have the scars from that. We have the scars from you don't share, you bottle it in. And now we're in the cuffs of this generation that's saying, no, everything needs to be said. Everything needs to be exposed.
Right.
And so it puts us right in the middle, for me, bringing it back to me, of trauma. What do I do? And I think we have to understand that healing is important in our pastoring. And healing is important for the people that we're pastoring. And we have to somehow heal together. At the same time, confronting the past so that way we can heal from the past, which is our predecessors, those who are older, so that way we can connect with them. My life has literally been all of that. I've had to let go of what my parents did because I lost a parent, to accept the one that's living, to have a proper relationship with him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for me, all is lost. I find that not funny that my pastoring is like that. I have to forgive those who wronged me in the past, to talk to those who are in my future, in my present.
Mm-hmm.
I have men that are now younger than me that I'm pastoring. That sometimes, oh man, feeling a little emotional. Sometimes looking at, damn, I feel like looking at myself. And I have to make the choice of not making the same mistake that people who are older than me made with me when I was that age.
Yep.
Such a delicate balance of trying to communicate the will of God to that person at that age frame. Yeah, people my age that I'm also pastoring, that I'm communicating with them the cadence and the heart of God. And now I have people that are older than me that I'm pastoring, having to be brave and debunk some ideologies that are not biblical.
Right.
I mean, they sound good on paper probably, but they're not good. So I hear about being all things to all men. That's why I literally think about what's in your environment that
Right.
you have to address and talk to. But at the same time, be vulnerable enough with those people that they might grow, but being careful of not being so defensive. I told my wife this week, I said, babe, I feel more defensive than I ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
Because people just been attacking me. And I almost can't discern what's truth about me as a critique or someone hurting me.
Yep.
And it's very hard to take anything right now. So I don't know if this is right, babe, but I just need to hear from God. And I just need to hear from him. I think we're scared to go to those places as an individual, period, that I'm scared just to let God deal with me. Because I can have powerful leaders in my life, but if I'm too hurt to even receive what they're saying, and it can be incredible, I can't hear. I got real skeptics and people who don't like me say things to me, and they could just be harmful attacks in this perpetual cycle of woundedness. God has to be able to speak so I can decipher what's real and what's not. And we're not above approach of that as pastors. But again, like I said, I've seen two realities. I've seen pastors not talk to anybody. Like, it's crazy you talk to a pastor, like, because not being a pastor, you're like, do you talk to people about that? Oh, no,
Right.
I got no one I could talk to about that.
And that's it, to you know, go back to something that you said before, T. I remember the first one for me that I watch. I'm not usually like a Christian celebrity type. Like, I don't follow like celebrity pastors and all of that kind of stuff. There have been many a person who, between Ant and Andrew, I've been like, who is this guy? Who is this? Like, and they just say it like, oh yeah, so and so, and I'm like, you're gonna have to smarten me up here, just because that's just not my bag. The first one since me being involved in ministry that fell was Ravi Zacharias. And the dude that I was doing ministry with at the time was really impacted by Ravi Zacharias falling and his reputation being called into question. Because he had been impacted by dude's ministry. And the one thing that I always seem to see universally, the circumstances and the particulars, they change. But boiled down, the one thing that I always tend to see is isolated, unchecked power, undealt with issues. Some combination of those things. And it's a rough beat, and that's why I asked the question, and you gave almost exactly the answer that I would have thought that you would have given, Ant. You know, that you're not out here trying to judge a person's heart, but that from an outside perspective, it can look that way. And I think we probably, if I were to guess, probably each one of us falls on at different points of how much we take into consideration what that outside perception does to how we act and all of that. I would guess that goalpost is placed in different spots for each one of us, but it's a rough beat when you are in a situation where truly and completely you are trying to give out, being unapologetically who you are, but as a tool to reach the various groups of people, as a tool to be everything to everybody and all of that kind of stuff. But then you turn around and you can't share what's going on with you because there's this expectation that that's just life.
Mhm.
You just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and that sort of thing. You had just said something, Ant. I don't know. I saw your mouth move, but I didn't hear you, so I don't know if your audio is out.
I just agreed with you.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a technical problem. But that's where, like, it might seem like I'm trying to be the contrarian as far as a lot of these aspects go and a lot of these conversations go, but I'm trying to outline the fact that for as much as we talk about the cultural differences in what this role means in different communities, in different people groups, in different situations, in different circumstances, part also to be considered in all of that is the age factor. Because when you look at guys like, I forget exactly now at what point it was said, I can't remember who said it, but there was a very, very clear and present moment that this stream is made up of 3 people that are in their 30s and 1 person who's not. That became painfully and abundantly obvious very, very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's younger than 30.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Oh my goodness.
And I'm sure, Ant, when you were 30, you had your own versions of not being taken seriously because of your age, disconnect with older generations, so on and so forth and so on, and all of the things that we talk about being in our 30s. You had your own flavor of them. Every generation does. We're not special in that way. But when we chart this course of being unapologetically us and being common and all of those kinds of things, to bring it back to the beginning, we have to understand that there is a difference between how our generation views this and how older generations view this. I will be the first one to admit tact. We all need tact. You need tact heading up in the pulpit. I'm not going to step up there and start laying out the entirety of my garbage bag and start dumping it all over the pulpit and all that kind of stuff. That's me just grabbing bricks out of my bag and lobbing them at people. I'm all for tact, right? But at the same time, have we become so focused on not doing that we don't give each other the ability to bleed? And that's one thing to talk about from the congregation. That's another thing to talk about from our contemporaries within the pulpit. Because the reality is many of us go through situations where we are not given the margin to be able to bleed among our peers and really be able to outlet what it is that we are feeling and what it is that we are experiencing and all of those kinds of things. Generally, because it's a group of other people who are bleeding out themselves and don't have healthy coping mechanisms to deal with it in their own self.
Right.
Like that's just the reality of the situation. But I think if there's any one thing, nuances aside, language points aside, whatever aside, okay, there are plenty of things that we have said on this stream that we all vibe on. There's plenty of things that we've said in the last almost 3 hours that we don't agree on at all. Okay, but at the end of the day, I think the one thing that we can come back to is being able to show a level of relatability that shows that you can understand the human condition and be approachable. That matters. That really does matter. And that there is a a difference between somebody who shows themselves as wise and sage and seasoned by virtue of I'm older or I'm in the position versus somebody's like, yo, I've got the scars for this. I've experienced things and have the scars to prove it.
And that's where the need for us to actually talk about discipleship well has to come in. Because, again, this is something like I'm pretty sure it was maybe first day of Greg Linville's class as a freshman, where he laid out the Timothy, Paul, Barnabas type scenario. And one of the things that he's always taught was the fact that when you are Timothy, you need to be, as you are moving through, the goal of your Paul is to make you a Barnabas and not stay Timothy. And the goal of you as Timothy is to be finding your own Timothy that you are going to be Paul for. And that is something that is not done very often. I'm lucky enough that I've got two different Pauls that I'm able to call. Both of those Pauls consider me Barnabas. And they're even in some areas like doing these sort of things where they have told me that I'm basically Paul in the scenario and they are now Timothy. But the only reason that we can get to that point is because of the fact that there's a mutual respect, a mutual understanding of the gifting God gives, and a mutual understanding of the fact that our goal is all the same. And so it doesn't matter who's doing what. If God has put somebody in a certain position, that's where we need to be. That's one of the things I've got was this, which is just it's a very old copy of Josephus that just looks like a basic copy of Josephus. But what's inside of here, Greg handed this to me as he was moving out of his office. He got it from his mentor. There's 2 generations worth of notes in this thing. And the point of him giving it to me is that I'm going to be putting notes in as well and handing it off to Timothy at some point. But that is the kind of discipleship type relationship that pastors are called to have with other pastors. It's not just say, well, you're too young to do this, so get out of my way because this is my wheelhouse, or this is literally the house I built in some cases. But Timothy, my son, preach the message that I have shown you how to preach, which requires you also to go out and find your own Timothy and have those Timothys trained up so well that they go out and find their own Timothys. And it goes on and on and on for generations. But that's what it looks like to be a pastor of other pastors.
I agree.
Yep. All right, guys, we've been on the air for almost 3 hours. So any final comments before we bring it in for a landing?
I would like to say that I really enjoyed your comment, Andrew, about the goal being for people not to remain as Timothy and Titus, but them to become Barnabas, and I'll even include Silas, right? That to me is where the pastoral conversation about common really is where the rubber meets the road, because in order for that to happen, there's a transparency and an authenticity that you end up having with that individual as they come alongside you versus, or as they're coming up to come alongside you, for lack of a better, I don't know how to say that without it sounding person over another person, but Timothy becoming that peer, there's openness, there is transparency, there is moments where they see you vulnerable. You look at Paul's letters, like, all right, I'm about to make a fool of myself and I'm going to say some things right now that you need to give me a little room for, right? That type of thing. And Timothy being right there for that. disagreeing with Barnabas, having an argument with Peter, and calling out Barnabas because of Peter. Those exchanges are not to be hidden in a sense. I think they should be natural, they should be normal, but at the same time, in order for pastors to be seen as real people, we have to actually be real people. I think sometimes you're taught that you can't be a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're taught that you can't be a real person, you take an extreme position, right? I'm either going to be totally closed off or I'm going to buck the system. I'm going to be all the way over here, right? Instead of understanding, like, well, I don't have to be neither one of those. I have to be me. I don't have to try to be more of this or try to be less that. I'm just going to be who I am, And for some people, it may seem so normal that they're saying, well, it doesn't look like you're doing anything. It's because I'm actually not. I'm just being me.
Right.
I'm just being the person that I am. I'm not actually trying to prove this or prove that. I'm just being the person that I am. And actually articulating that so that people will give you that space to be that. And having more conversations like this in front of other people, like, hey, pastors are humans too. And having that conversation more openly around other people. The Chris Norwood was on here earlier. Me and him watched boxing together. We went to a CU USC game together, hung out, right? Pastors are humans, right? I'm a big sports guy, probably in a way that people would turn off, like, oh man, he's too into that sports stuff, but I'm human too, right? And I'm not going to shove sports down your throat and say, well, if you don't like sports, I'm just that's my thing and I enjoy it. And what's your thing? What do you enjoy? Right? So I think being human will set the stage for people to eventually allow you to be human. But if I am one extreme or the other, now I'm going to create more of a problem than what there already is.
And what you just said is, again, back to, the way they see us is how they're going to react to God. Is the idea, if they're looking at us and like, well, he likes sports and that's all it's either God or sports, and he's going to shove both. If he's going to shove sports down my throat, he's going to shove God down my throat too. Rather than, wow, this guy likes both of these. He's willing to talk about both of these. He's educated in both of these. But yet he's still sitting here on my couch with me. That's when suddenly conversations can happen. That's what discipleship looks like.
Yep. That's good. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for joining us for this action-packed episode of Let It Rip. Guys, thank you all for your time this morning, gentlemen, and thank you all of you that commented and engaged in the comment section. We have one last one as we head out. Brenda K says, thank you, guys. I appreciate all of you. God bless you and give you strength as you continue in his will and your calling. Guys, we will be back next week, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 Central, 7:30 Mountain, 6:30 Pacific for another edition of Let It Rip. You can also catch Andrew and I, as well as some other voices along the way every Friday morning, same time, over at Kingdom on the Road. You can find both shows by looking up, heading on over to YouTube, looking up Kingdom on the Road, like, share, subscribe, do all of those things. If there's somebody that you think would benefit from these kinds of conversations that we're having, share this with a friend. Let people know we have what we have going on here in the mornings. We have one more comment at the buzzer, so to speak, for all you sports fans out there. Good morning, great conversation. I can't wait to go back and see how this discussion developed. When I got on, TC was demonstrating real time what it looks like to be human / common and holy, and that was from Tim Mays. Good morning, Tim. Thank you.
There's the buzzer.
Well done. Well done. Guys, until next week, remember 2 very important things: that you are prayed for and you are loved deeply. Peace, y'all.